This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, Brian, I guess we can get started with the meeting. Welcome, everybody. My name is Brad Harris. I'm the Transportation Project Director here at the Montachusett Regional Planning Commission. Unfortunately, our Vice Chair, Dick Kilhart, and our Secretary, Guy Corbacero, couldn't make the meeting today. So I will be taking their place and running the meeting as the chair. If anyone has any questions during the meeting, please don't feel free to interrupt and ask the question, and we'll try and answer as best as we can. So looking at the agenda, the first item we have is introduction. We do have a list on participants. If possible, Brian, if you could just read the participant list and just say if you let us know you're here, and we'll go from there.
Okay, I'm Brian Doherty with MRPC. Sherry Bean.
Here.
Daryl Amaral.
Here.
Brian Croto. Brian
Present.
Doheny.
Brian Doheny here.
And Brian Croto.
Yep, present, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn Sellers.
Here.
David Klein.
Here.
Elizabeth Faxon.
Here. Townsend.
George Kahali.
Present.
George Snow.
Here.
Janet Tice.
Here.
Jasmine Farinaki. Jasmine. Richard Kilhart, or Richard Mackey, I assume.
Here.
Robert Schwartz.
Here.
Sarah Bradbury.
Here.
Tim Kilhart.
Here.
And Veronica Kell.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a quorum, no problem meeting that. I just have one question. Carolyn Sellers, are you representing a town or just the general public?
Just the general public.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is public comments. Does anyone have any comments they'd like to make or questions I'd like to ask at this time? I do not see any raised hands out there. So I will take that as a no, and we'll move on to item number 3, approval of the April 13th, 2022 minutes. Hopefully you've all received a copy of this minutes with the meeting announcements. Are there any questions or changes that need to be made to the minutes as presented? Not seeing or hearing any. I need general consensus to accept the minutes as presented. Does anyone object to that?
Accepted.
Not hearing any, we'll take the minutes accepted, and the consensus is to accept the minutes as presented. Thank you very much. On to item number 4, selection of a nominating committee. As you know, we annually go through the process of electing a chair, vice chair, and secretary for the Planning Commission. This past year, we lost the chairman during the second part of last year, 2021. So we've been without a chair for the past few months. The vice chair, Dick Kilhart, has been filling in that role. But basically, to start the process, we look for a nominating committee, which is just up to 3 people who get together and put together a slate, someone for chair, someone for vice chair, and someone for secretary. Typically, the nominating committee will meet 15, 20 minutes before the next MJTC meeting in June and give us the slate at that time. Also in June, we'll open the floor to nominations. And then once that's done, we will then have the election scheduled for July. So the typical process is to ask for a volunteer who would like to be on the nominating committee. It can be anyone. We have no restrictions on who can be part of the nominating committee. And we are here at the MRPC are available to assist in any way possible. So is there anyone who would like to volunteer to serve as sort of the chair of the nominating committee?
Volunteer.
Bob
Sure.
Schwartz from Gardner I'll do that.
Okay, and George Cahill, you volunteered to be nominated for me too?
Yeah, can the nominating committee be volunteers for committee?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
anyone, we don't have any restrictions on who's on nominating, so we have Bob Schwartz from Gardner and George Cahaley from Mart. Is there anyone else who would like to serve as on a nominating committee? Just one more. No? Okay. Bob, did you want to be the chair or the convener of the nominating committee?
Sure, I've done that before.
Okay. We'll also send out notices and we'll see if we can round up a 3rd person to be part of the nominating committee. But as of right now, the nominating committee consists of Bob Schwartz as the convener and George Cahaley as a member of the committee.
Hey, Brian.
Thank you. What?
Brian, it's Brian. I'll do it.
Oh, okay. All right, so then we have Brian Crotto, who will also serve on a nominating. Great, that's 3 people. And I will get in touch with you all in the near future and we'll set up the nominating committee meeting. And like I said, it should be like 15 minutes before the upcoming June meeting. Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Now on to the next agenda item, which is item number 5. FFY 2022 to 2026 Montachusett Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. Discussion on draft amendment number 4 to the highway and transit elements. And that's going to be George Snow. George? George, you there? Oh no. Looks like his camera might be frozen. And now it's gone away, so, all right. Well, looks like we might be having some technical difficulties with George Snow. I'll quickly cover this for him. Can you put up the, Brian, can you put up the notice? Okay. What you see on the screen right now is a memo that went out for announcing the start of a public comment period for what we're calling TIP amendment number 4. It went out for a 21-day public review and comment period. And that comment period began on, let me just see, began on April 26th, and it goes until Monday, May 16th next week. The amendment basically involves 3 projects on the highway side. We'll put that up first, Brian. On the highway side, we're looking at changes to 2 projects. George, you back?
Yeah, I'm back. My computer just froze.
Okay.
So I exited and now I'm back in.
All right, do you want to take over? I did the memo announcing the period, and now I'm just covering the highway amendment
Okay.
changes.
Yeah, so the highway amendment is on screen. Great.
Yep.
Okay. The first highway element project is number 610672 on Elm Street in Guyana for resurfacing and sidewalk improvements, and is a Safe Routes to School funded project. The project has experienced delays, and due to the delays, the project needs to be moved from FFY22 to FFY23. The second project is number 610730 on Route 2 in Westminster, Fitchburg for pavement preservation and related work. This project should be removed from FFY24 because it was advertised in December 2021 with non-federal aid funds. Neither project affects the target goals or addresses physical constraint issues. The amendment is needed because one project is being moved from one fiscal year to the next, and one project is being taken out of the TIP, which requires an amendment. The transit element next, please. The changes include removing 3 projects, which are highlighted in red, and cost changes to 6 projects, which are highlighted in yellow. No new projects are being added, and there is no impact on the transit budget. At the MPO meeting held on April 20th, 2022, the MPO reviewed the proposed amendment and voted that it be released for public review and comment. The comment period commenced on Tuesday, April 26, 2022, and will close at the end of business on Monday, May 16th, 2022. This MJTC meeting is also serving as an opportunity for public comment. To date, we have not received any comments on this amendment. We're also looking for a recommendation from the MJTC to the MPO that we will forward to the MPO for their meeting next week when this item comes up for endorsement. And that's it.
Any questions for George? Or any comments on the amendment as presented? Seeing none. Again, as George mentioned, we'd like to have a recommendation to have this for the MPO to endorse the amendment as presented. So I'll make a motion. Basically, the motion is to recommend, the MJTC recommends that the MPO at their meeting next week endorse TIP amendment number 4 as presented. Is there any objections to that proposal?
Move
I
the
second
amendment.
that.
Okay, not seeing any or hearing any. We'll take that as a affirmative on the recommendation. Thank you very much. Excuse me. Thank you, and thank you, George. On to the next item, which is the bipartisan infrastructure law, or BIL, presentation. All right, this is going to be mine, and I will try and cover this in a sensible manner so that you'll understand what we're talking about. And also, if I go too fast, there's a lot of dollar figures in this and a lot of acronyms thrown around. But if you have any questions, feel free to just shout them out or interrupt me at any point, and we'll try and answer them as best we can. So basically, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, or BIL, is the most recent federal transportation funding authorization bill. It's just like prior bills that the authorizations have been put forward, such as the FAST Act, the ICE-T, NEXT-T, all the nice acronyms that Congress comes up with transportation funding authorization. But the BIL is for a 5-year authorization that will run from 2022 to 2026. Next slide. This is just a little run through of how the presentation will go and what process we'll be looking at. We'll first discuss the highway programs, then go on to transit, and then the discretionary programs will be covered. Next slide. During a 5-year period of the BIL, Massachusetts is scheduled to receive apportionments equal to about $5.4 billion in highway formula funds. And again, this is over 2022 to 2026. Of this $5.4 billion, this includes $3.5 billion in reauthorized amounts already programmed in the current State Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP, $449 million in increased funding for existing STIP programs, and $1.4 billion for other formula programs. These new formula programs include $1.125 billion for a new bridge program, $106.5 million for a new resiliency program known as PROTECT, $93.7 million for a new carbon reduction program, $63.5 million for a new electric vehicle infrastructure program, and $9.1 million for ferry boats and terminals. So there's a lot of money coming into the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. This slide kind of defines some of the funding nomenclature that you'll see throughout this, but just briefly, the bipartisan infrastructure law includes three distinct types of funding: contract authority, which is used for programs funded from the Highway Trust Fund; supplemental appropriations, which are appropriations made in a reauthorization act instead of the annual appropriations bill; and authorizations subject to appropriation, which are program amounts that are included in a reauthorization act but require a subsequent appropriations to effectuate them. Next slide, please. So this slide talks about the 2022 Omnibus Appropriations Bill, how it fits into the BIL, and basically once Congress passed the Omnibus Appropriations and the President signed it, this unlocked the FY 2022 increases in funding that are seen in the BIL for distribution to the states across the country. Excuse me. The Omnibus also provides efficient obligation authority for the 2022 increases in the BIL and allows for the implementation of any new programs under Federal Highways Contract Authority. So this basically got the ball rolling on the programs in the BIL and the funding for the projects. Next slide. So what does the BIL mean for our region and the TIP, which we're all sort of familiar with, I hope? Basically, the regional target funding is in the TIP. As you may recall, it's based upon a formula that we go through every year, and it's funds coming from the Highway Trust Fund. So for the years 22 to 26, which gave us new dollar figures, the state calculated new target figures for our region as well as for all the other regions across the state. So in FY 22, we saw a regional target increase by $2,028,930. And MassDOT is going to be working with Mass Highway districts and us at the MPO to see how we can identify projects for this additional funding in FY 22. For FY 23 to 26, our targets were based upon a formula developed by Massachusetts Association of Regional Planning Agencies, or MARPA, and that has resulted in an increase in our overall target funding for all 5 years of $8.8 million. I'm sorry, 4 years, $8.8 million. And that's been reflected in the development of the latest TIP that we'll be discussing later. So last year, when we put together the 22 to 26 TIP, we had a funding limit that was basically $8.8 million less than what we have in this new TIP. So each fiscal year had a new amount based upon the appropriations in the bipartisan infrastructure law. Next, please. The BIL also affected statewide funding. Statewide funding in our TIPs is based upon a combination of formula funds from the Highway Trust Fund and formula funds apportioned to Massachusetts from supplemental appropriations. Massachusetts distributes approximately 2/3 of the Highway Trust funds to statewide projects and programs such as bridge, highway, bicycle and pedestrian projects, as well as MPO planning funds and extra work orders and award adjustments. So you see an increase in the statewide funds that the state has to do a lot of road and bridge projects across the Commonwealth. Next, please. On supplemental appropriations, we note that the Massachusetts apportionment under the new formula bridge program is estimated to be $1.1 billion over 5 years, approximately $225.3 million per year. Also, under the new electric vehicle infrastructure program, Massachusetts is seeing 63.5 million over 5 years. And these programs are being, some of these programs are developed for grant programs that need to be met in order to receive some of the funding. Next, please. So what we should note about the BIL is that over the 5-year period from 22 to 26, Massachusetts transportation formula funding has increased by 34%, including 449 million in increased apportionments for existing programs, 200 million for 2 new highway trust fund funded programs, carbon reduction and protect, and 1.2 billion for 2 new supplemental appropriation funded programs, formula bridge and electric vehicle infrastructure. Next slide. On the transit side of the BIL, Massachusetts' 5-year transit formula funding, again for 22 to 26, is approximately $2.8 billion, of which 2.2 billion is for the MBTA. And the remaining 600 million is distributed among the regional transit authorities through various methods. So transit formula funds under the BIL are comprised of urbanized area funds, state of good repair funds, and bus and facility funds. There were no new transit formula programs established in the BIL. Next, please. BIL also established or authorized a number of new discretionary programs. Basically, there were 35 new discretionary or competitive programs established with total funding in excess of $110 billion. 18 existing programs are reauthorized at about $77.3 billion, and 19 new programs have been authorized at about $36.1 billion. The second grouping there is a listing of the various agencies that administer these new programs. And basically, you see the Office of the Secretary, which is the Secretary of DOT, is responsible for administering 5 programs at $19 billion, Federal Highway at 17 programs, FTA 10 programs, FRA, which is the Federal Railroad Association, and Maritime, 1 program at $2.3 billion. Next, please. So let's look at the discretionary programs that are under the purview of the Office of the Secretary of DOT. They include local, and 3 of the major programs, 3 of the more major programs include local and regional project assistance grants, or RAIS as they're called. You may recall last year we did a application for a RAIS grant project for the town of Athol. But this is an existing program that's been reauthorized at $7.5 billion for the 5 years. A notice of funding opportunity, or NOFO, for FFY22 was issued back in February. Applications were due on April 14th. So they'll be looking at those and seeing what they can hopefully select for projects in FY22. And basically in 22 also, there was about $1.5 billion available for these programs. Then you have the National Infrastructure Project Assistance Grants, commonly called mega projects. It's a new program authorized at $5 billion over 4 years. Selection criteria was released on February 14th. We have to take a look at those in the near future. Then there is Safe Streets and Roads for All. This has also been abbreviated as SS4A. This is a new program authorized at $5 billion over 5 years. A NOFO hasn't been released yet. Hopefully that's coming soon. It's open to MPOs, local governments, transit authorities, and so forth. But it's not open to the State Department of Transportation or the state on a whole. So this is a program that we'll talk about a little bit later on one of the announcements on the funding handouts. Next slide, please. On the federal highway side, there are 6 large programs administered by FHWA. The first is the infra grants for nationally significant freight and highway projects. This is an existing program authorized at $8 billion over 5 years. Federal Highways is expected to release a NOFO on this in the first quarter of calendar year 2022. And then you have the Bridge Investment Program, which is a new program authorized at $12.5 billion over 5 years. Next slide. Continuing up on federal highway, we have promoting resilient operations for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation grants, or PROTECT. It's a new program at $1.4 billion for the 5 years. It includes $325 million set-asides for at-risk coastal infrastructure, community resilience, and evacuation of routes and planning. Okay, and then the third, or the final on the federal highway side, I'm sorry, the next one on the federal highway side, charging and fueling infrastructure grants. This is also a new program at $2.5 billion over 5 years. Next slide, please. The last two of the discretionary programs on the federal highway include the Rural Surface Transportation Grants, which is a new program at $2 billion over 5 years. There's 3 set-asides included in that $2 billion, 10% for small projects under $25 million, 25% for Appalachian Development Highways, and 15% for states with higher than average rural roadway lane departure fatalities. And then the last one is Reconnecting Communities Pilot Program, which is again a new program at $1 billion over 5 years. Next, please. On the federal transit side, there are 5 large programs. The first is the Capital Investment Grants, which is an existing program reauthorized at $8 billion. It funds new starts, small starts, and core capacity projects. Second is the Low or No Emission Bus Grants, which is an existing program reauthorized at $5.6 billion over 5 years. A notice of funding opportunity was released on this on March 4th. Next, and the last 3 under federal transit purview, bus and bus facilities competitive grants, which again is an existing program at $2 billion. A NOFO was released on that on March 4th. Then we have All Stations Accessibility Program, which is brand new, authorized at $1.8 billion. And the purpose is to upgrade the accessibility of legacy rail fixed guideway public transportation systems for people with disabilities. And the last is the Rail Vehicle Replacement Grants, which is a new program at $1.5 billion. It's limited to a maximum of 3 projects per year, and the projects may be multi-year. So those are the new discretionary programs in federal transit. What we need to take away from the discretionary programs is that many of the notice of funding opportunities have yet to be released or are still under development by USDOT. Those NOFOs, as they're called, will tell you, and they'll spell out how to apply for the program, what types of projects are eligible, what kind of spending limits or limits there are on asking for projects, how to go about applying, and most of those applications will be online through the government's grants.gov program. But once those notices of funding opportunities are released, then that will give you an idea how to go about putting together your application to try and access some of these funds. And the other thing to take away from this is that if there are towns or agencies out there, that there are a lot of funds now coming into the state and new programs that have been developed that could get a lot of things addressed or possibly help out with some issues in your towns. We at the MRPC will be looking at some of these. MPOs are eligible to apply for projects for some of these programs. So we have to look at our role in that and how we can best go about accessing some of those funds. So just know that keep an eye out on some of these notice of funding opportunities, and also reach out to us on a regular basis. We'll also come back to you at MJTC with updated information on these programs, and if we get any interest. As I mentioned before, I'm going to highlight something in the updates on series of webinars that some of us attended on the Safe Streets for All program. MPOs are eligible to apply for that. We don't know what the overall requirements are because, again, the NOFO on that hasn't been released. But there's opportunities there for us to develop incident plans, safety plans. There's also opportunities for communities to address safety issues in the towns. Towns can gather together and do multiple communities on one application and so forth. So there's a lot of possibilities on that program, and we'll be keeping an eye on that one as the regulations get released, and we can hopefully apply for something on behalf of either ourselves or community, or working in conjunction with the community. So that's a brief look into the BIL. Hopefully you'll have some thoughts about the programs, and maybe you'll be able to find something that can address something in your community. But again, keep us in mind. Let us know if you have questions. We can always try and track down some information for you and give you further knowledge on these different programs. With that, are there any questions?
Brad, this is Bob Swartz.
Yep.
Being relatively new on the committee, could you clarify again what NOFO means?
NOFO stands for Notice of Funding Opportunity.
Okay.
Basically, the federal government or some state will just release this booklet through the Federal Register, and it'll tell you, to outline the program, how to apply, and what you can apply for.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Any other questions?
Brad, I have a question on the Safe Streets for All.
Yep.
Again, we haven't talked about it yet in our community, but we have that intersection at Proctor Road and 119 that's actually not in Townsend. It's Pepperell and Groton. Groton is part of this planning region, but Pepperell is part of the Lowell area one. I don't know the name of that one. But in any event, if we're across planning, we really need to look at that intersection in conjunction with the high school there. And we've talked about it for a long time. How would we go about doing that if it's not just the Montachusett region planning, but it's the other one?
Specifically, I don't know. My thought would be we would just take a lead agency. One of us would be the lead and get an agreement among the three communities to proceed that way, or the application might be from both agencies, under both agencies' purview. We'll have to check the NOFO funding opportunity right up as to see if there's any discussion on that. I do know when we went to the webinar on the Safe Streets for All program, they did talk about communities joining together. So instead of one community applying, 2, 3, or 4 communities could get together. They didn't have to be adjoining. They could just get together and decide to do X, Y, and Z. One of the things we have to check into is, it sounded also that they'd be looking for backup information or an incident report as to why there's a problem here. So it might be, our first step might be to do a regional or a town-wide plan that answers those questions, so that then we can apply for funding for projects. So those things we still need to get clarify in our minds as to how this is going to approach. But I don't think it would be too difficult for us to work with the next RPA over and figure out how to do something for those for your communities.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Brad.
Yep.
Veronica, to your point, that location, we actually did do a study that looked at a signal warrant and safety issues there in 2009. I know that's a long time ago, but it could provide a lot of information for a baseline type of, if we were to re-examine it, that could give us some indication of how development in the area has affected that particular location. I know there's a number of condo developments down in Groton, down that road. I forget the name of the road, but in any event, we have done actually a study at that intersection before. So if need be, we could re-reference that and add more information to that, such as traffic counts and whatnot.
Good to know. All right, we'll talk then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brian should be able to forward you a copy of that. We'll dig into our archives and see if we can find the copy.
All right.
Any other questions on the BIL? No? Okay, great. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 7, the FFY 2023 to 27 Montachusett Transportation Improvement Program, and a review and discussion on draft tip document. And I'll turn that over to Brian.
Okay, so there is a memo in the handouts. This covers the 2023 through 27 tip and also the draft 2023 UPWP that are both out for public comment currently, have been for the last few weeks, and the comment period ends May 16th. So these have been major topics of discussion over the last few months with the JTC, as everyone is aware. On the tip side, normally we don't receive too many comments. We always receive comments from Mass DOT Office of Transportation Planning and usually Federal Highway. So those are actually the 2 comments that have come in so far during the comment period. And I'll briefly go over those. Both sets of comments are relatively minor. There's no major changes that they requested or suggested. On the Federal Highway side, they actually made a joint comment with the Federal Transit Authority. For example, of some of the minor edits that they suggest. The first one here in the handout is page 13. We referenced Mass DOT Secretary Jamie Tesler as acting secretary, which he previously was, but they're suggesting removing the acting because he's no longer just acting, he's the actual secretary. So those are some examples of the kind of minor edits that they're suggesting. If you move down to page 54, they suggest adding additional language about the bipartisan infrastructure legislation that Brad was just speaking about. On pages 69 to 74, they're referencing some tables that need some minor updating. So we'll be sure to do that for the final version. And their last comment here is more minor edits, in this case, regarding to an acronym. So we're working on sort of making these small edits before the final version is presented to the MPO next week. Office of Transportation Planning comments, you can see here, very similar to the Federal Highway and FTA comments. The first group of comments regarding completeness, these are all relatively minor edits that we plan to make. In regards to narrative, just like the feds, they recommend including additional language on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And finally, adding some additional information on a few projects under a project listing section. So we're in the process of making these changes to the document. Like I mentioned, the comment period for both the TIP and the UPWP is open until next Monday, the 16th. So we're still able to receive comments. If you'd like to make a comment, you can email the comments to any of us on the staff. We can include it in the final document. You can find both documents on our website. So today is also an opportunity for the MJTC to make any comments on the draft tip. And ultimately, what we're looking for is a recommendation from the JTC to the MPO that they endorse the final version of the 23 through 27 tip at its meeting next week. So that is all I have on the tip.
Are there any questions for Brian or on the tip itself? Any comments that you'd like us to add to the tip? Not seeing any. As Brian mentioned, we're looking for a recommendation that the MPO endorse the TIP as presented at their next MPO meeting. Does anyone object to that recommendation? Seeing and hearing none, we'll assume that that is approved. So thank you very much. On to the next item on the agenda is FFY 2023 Unified Work Planning Program, or UPWP. And again, a review and discussion of draft UPWP document. And that one is Sherry's.
All right, so just like Brian had indicated, this document is also out for public comment until the 16th. We've also received, very similar to the tip, comments from MassDOT and Federal Highway. And a lot of the comments are very similar to the tip, so I won't be super redundant, but just to give you a brief overview, for the MassDOT comments, they found a broken web link that we have fixed. In the equity section, there was a pixelated map that they wanted a little bit more higher quality image, as well as a legend added to one of the other maps. The MPO member listing on our MRPC website was out of date, so we have updated that. And then they wanted some more information on the memorandum of understanding that we have with other departments, as well as MassDOT and Federal Highway. For task 2.5, they were looking for a little more information on performance-based planning, so we'll incorporate that more heavily into that task, as well as we were missing some information on congestion mitigation planning efforts. We had included that in the past UPWP document, but it was not very clear or as extensive in the current one, so we will be updating that. We'll be updating a couple of tasks to incorporate more of that, or we may create a completely additional task to hone in more on the congestion mitigation. For Federal Highway, we need to go through the document more thoroughly for accessibility, so that we can incorporate some kind of text behind images and tables to explain what they are for visually impaired people or other disabilities. They have different softwares out there that read documents. We want to make sure that it's clear and concise for everybody. There was a question on page 47 of the document. They want us to check the budget table. We might be missing a 0 or something. And then page 66, they were looking to see if there were similar efforts for performance measures to be used for the regional transportation plan. So we'll have to just make a note of that within the document. Other than that, the comments are pretty straightforward and fairly, I think, pretty simple to update. So we'll be working on that within the next week or two before we vote on the final document at the MPO meeting next week. Just like the tip, we are looking for the MJTC to recommend an endorsement to the MPO next week.
Okay, any questions or comments for Sherry or on the UPWP? No, and as Sherry mentioned, we're looking for a recommendation that the MJTC recommends the MPO endorse the UPWP as presented, with the updates made based upon the comments received. Does anyone object to that recommendation? Seeing and hearing none, looks like we have consensus on that item too. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sherry. Moving on to item number 9, contract status reports. Federal Transit Administration and Regional Transit Authority. George, do you have anything you'd like to mention on this end?
Really, I don't have too much. The only one I have is Martha is going to do some major rehab on the ITC, rehabbing the whole facility, and will be some impact on the rider people using the ITC starting sometime September. Other than that, really, I don't have anything.
Okay, any questions for George related to MART or the FTA? From the Planning Commission's point of view, we really don't have any updates yet. We're still continuing to work on the transit planning tasks that we have in last year's TIP. So hopefully we'll be able to get those wrapped up this program year, and we'll make a presentation at some point to the MJTC. On to contract updates, Mass DOT. I have a few items. As mentioned, the MPO will meet next week on May 18th at 1 p.m. As discussed earlier, the major action items will be the endorsement of the 23 to 27 TIP and the 2023 UPWP. There'll also be discussion of a possible FFY 2022 TIP amendment number 5. This will be related to a project cost change for the Ashby Route 31 Turnpike Road roundabout project. Several factors have led to the overall cost estimate to increase. The project is scheduled for advertisement on July 30th, and the comment period will likely run for this amendment from May 23rd to June 13th. Again, it's at 100% design, and there's just some changes based upon a number of factors that are leading to the project needing to be updated. It is not a target project, it's a statewide project, which is not going to affect our other projects in 2022 or our fiscal constraint. The Planning Commission is in the process of looking to hire a consultant to assist us with our traffic count program this year. We've had really no success in the hiring of interns, so we are exploring this option. Bids are due to us by the end of this week, so maybe we'll be having some discussion at the next JTC about a consultant coming in to do our traffic counts for us across the region. Some handouts of note are available. And again, if you don't have these available with you or want to take a look at them, they're available on our website if you go to the meeting announcement for this MJTC meeting. The first relates to, again, as mentioned before, the Safe Streets and Roads for All, or known as SS4A grant program. There are several eligible activities for this program that communities and MPOs can apply for. Webinars were held for tribal governments, towns and transit authorities, and MPOs. The grant application process for this program is not opened as of yet, but is expected to begin this spring. Recordings of each of these webinars is available for viewing if you go to transportation.gov/SS4A. It'll give you some more information on that program. The second handout is from Mass Trails, announcing a spring grant round for Mass Trails grants. The grant amount has increased to $500,000 per award, and deadline is coming up soon. It's May 16th, for anyone who's interested. The final handout is for upcoming public comment release of the FFY 2023-2027 Massachusetts Capital Investment Plan, or CIP. Virtual public meetings will be held between May 24th to June 2nd. The Central Mass meeting is set for May 26th at 6 p.m. Individuals can attend any of these meetings, as most of the information will be the same. However, at each event in the series, they'll highlight investments in a specific region. So for our region, they'll highlight projects in MRPC region and Central Mass at the May 26th meeting. But the rest of the meetings are present the general same information. And the public will be invited to submit any comments they wish during this open meeting process. And finally, we were informed at the MPO meeting last month that Arthur Frost, the MassDOT Project Development Engineer for District 3, will be retiring at the end of this month. Arthur has been one of our main points of contact for the TIP, project guidance, initiation, discussion, and so forth. And he's been an invaluable resource for us over the years. And all of our staff wants to wish him the best and of luck in his retirement. And we'll miss his input as we move forward. And I know he was a friend to the town, so we just want to wish him best of luck. Any questions?
Very good. I have a question. How many traffic count you are going to do this year?
We're roughly looking at 33 on the MassDOT side and about an additional 30 odd on our side. So about 60 counts altogether is what we're looking at. And that
Okay,
should hopefully caught us back up to where we should be.
very good, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, moving on to item 10, administrative matters. The next MJTC meeting is Wednesday, June 8th at 2:30 p.m. With that, we move on to adjournment. If there's no other questions or comments, we can adjourn.
Good, thank you.
Kim, thank you all
Thank
for
you.
attending. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Sherry, don't go yet. I just saw that email you sent me, forwarded me. I didn't get a chance to reply to them yet.
Hold on.
I'm the traffic count guy. Okay,
Yeah, I'm just I was waiting for Jasmine.
yeah, I think basically it's 60 odd counts. Tell them that
Yeah,
we're
I
looking
think
at
he was
60
just,
counts.
it might have been mentioned in two different spots as a different number, I think is what he was saying, and I don't remember.
I think maybe what it is he saw the list of the state counts, which is only about 33 counts. And
Yeah.
then we talked about doing 60 counts.
Right.
So I think it's just letting them know that it should be around 60 counts total. And
On the quote
33
form,
of
how
those,
many units did we use for each of the 4 categories? In the
What's that?
RFP, it mentions 60. I'm just reading his email. The actual count list has 33. Okay.
yeah. So I think if he quotes on the 60, that'll should do it.
Okay. I will respond right now.
Okay, great. All right, thanks.
Let me get some. All right.
All right, thanks, Brian.
Yeah.